Welcome to Ground Control. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I wanted to sit down and take time to think about it before I gave you my favorite trainer planes. I had a couple of other planes that I was going to include in this list to give you a total of 4 planes to choose from, but I didn't. The other 2 planes are 3-channel instead of 4-channel, and I wanted a person who's looking for a trainer plane to have something that they can grow with. And one of the reasons I chose these 2 planes is because of the breakaway prop. The other 2 planes that I thought about including, which are 3-channel planes, not 4-channel, do not have breakaway props, and so the gearboxes are susceptible to damage in a crash or in a prop strike. So that's why I chose not to list those. Now let me give you an analogy because I've seen this happen. Have you ever seen a little kid on a mini bike for the first time, and the throttle's up here on the handlebar, and the child is going along fine, and then he gets into a little bit of trouble, and then all of a sudden he opens up the throttle because he's panicked and he's forgotten how to roll the throttle forward to shut the throttle down. So he's got the throttle opened up and he's hanging on for dear life. Okay, he's completely panicked. Well, I've seen this with a new RC plane pilot as well, where they're flying along, they're not doing real well, but they're keeping it in the air, and then they get into a little bit of trouble, and it's going to impact the ground, right? You can see it. It's a new pilot. They're having a hard time keeping it in the air. They're not going to be able to fly out of the trouble they've gotten themselves into. And so the plane impacts the ground at a pretty good clip because they forgot or panicked and didn't shut off the throttle before the impact. So my criteria for a trainer plane, what do I consider a trainer plane? Well, I think that for a beginning pilot, you should be looking for something that is low mass, low weight, low inertia, because that they are going to experience at least one crash, maybe several crashes before they get competent at flying an RC aircraft, and you want to pick something that's going to be able to survive, right? Okay, so that's why I chose these 2 planes. These 2 planes are made out of EPP foam, and EPP foam is kind of a cushy, shock absorbing foam. It is the most durable foam that I have come across so far. So as far as durability, with the breakaway prop, it's a brushed system. Also, one of the criteria is, can you get spare parts for the plane? You can get spare parts for both of these planes. They're fairly inexpensive for what you get. I wouldn't necessarily require a gyro for a beginning pilot. I've had planes that do not have gyros in them that are very stable in the air. But a gyro, I would have to say, does help as long as the new pilot uses it as a learning tool and not as a crutch. Now, when I first started flying, I started off in quadcopters, and of course I only flew FPV. So when I transitioned over to planes, and it hasn't been that long ago, so I still remember what it was like, the hardest part for me was learning to fly line of sight, where you didn't have to think about the controls you were inputting when the plane was coming towards you. Then you're looking at reverse controls. You want the plane to move left when it's coming towards you. You got to remember that you need to bank it to the right. And so that was the single hardest thing for me. I could keep the plane in the air just fine. My trainer plane was my Glue and Fly Series F22 Mini version 2. Okay, it had no gyro system on it, but it only had elevons, so that made the controls fairly simple. It was bank and yank. But that was the hardest part for me, was to get to the point where I could fly at line of sight without having to think about which way I needed to input the controls, no matter what the profile of the plane while it was flying. So I think a gyro will help a new pilot overcome that more quickly, because he's not having to worry about keeping the plane in, you know, a level flight. So I think that's where a gyro comes in handy. The gyro will keep the plane in level flight. All he has to do is concentrate on inputting the proper controls. And since he's not having to worry about keeping the plane in the air, the gyro will do that. I think that they will pick up the line of sight skills much more quickly. That's where I think a gyro comes in very handy. So out of these two planes, my favorite trainer of all time of any plane, trainer plane that I have flown so far, is the Volantex Sport Cub 500. And in beginner mode, it's fantastic. A new pilot will not have any problems flying this plane. And intermediate mode, the gyro is absolutely fantastic too, and I don't think a beginner pilot will have any problems with it. Once you get competent with this plane in intermediate gyro mode, because the controls are much more sensitive in intermediate mode, and then you have the option of switching while you're in flight between gyro mode and manual mode. So at the flick of a switch, you can get yourself out of trouble. You know, if you're in trouble, flick that switch, get that gyro turn back on, and the plane will level itself back out. So that allows a new pilot also to practice his manual mode skills without having to worry about losing the plane. But plus the fact that these planes are so darn durable anyway. I've nosed this one in 3 or 4 times, knocked the prop off. The only thing that's happened with this plane so far, and it's had some pretty good knocks, is I broke one of the props, and that is it. I don't think I've wrecked the Sport Cub 500, but the reason I recommend this one more than I recommend the P51 Mustang, the Eachine Mini P51D Mustang, is that this one has an overhead wing, and overhead wings are by design more stable in the air than a low wing. This plane also doesn't quite have the speed that the P51 has. The P51 is a bit more agile as well as speedier than the Volantex 500. I think that the intermediate gyro mode on the Sport Cub 500 is a little better implemented than it is on the P51D. I also think that this one is easier to handle in full manual mode than is the P51D. So that's why this one came out on top. It just, you know, this is a plane, if you watch some more flights of this plane, there'll be links to the playlist for both of these planes in the show notes, as well as links to purchase the planes and parts for the planes. And these also make it very inexpensive to get into the hobby. I mean, they're ready to fly. They come with a transmitter. The transmitters definitely aren't great. They're toy transmitters, but they get the job done. And the parts are fairly inexpensive. It comes with a little USB charger for the 1S battery. So for getting a ready-to-fly plane that you can check all the boxes with, I think these two planes are the least expensive way, and I think the absolute best options for somebody who's wanting to get into the RC hobby or maybe just transition into planes. I think these two planes are it, and these are the two planes that I recommend, and I have lots of flights on both of these planes in beginner mode and intermediate mode and in manual mode. So these are the ones that I recommend. I just came across these planes in the autumn, I think, of 2019. I think is when I got the P51, and if I remember correctly, that the second one that I received was the Volantex Sport Cub 500. But you can't go wrong with that. You know, I don't recommend larger, heavier planes for trainer planes because they have mass, they have weight, they have inertia, and when they hit hard, they break. And so I don't want a new pilot to have to spend half of his time flying and half of his time making repairs. And I think with these two planes, a new pilot will not have to do that. And they're absolutely great planes. I mean, ready to fly planes where you can check all the boxes, and the parts are inexpensive. You're not having to invest in a balance charger or a separate transmitter or anything like that for under $100. I mean, you really can't beat that. The only thing that I would recommend also, if you buy either one of these planes, make sure you buy a couple of spare props. Even though they're breakaway props, you can bend and break the blades. Buy those and get you a dozen batteries, because you want to keep flying it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the air.